Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. If you have not put your name and contact information into the chat, please take a minute to do that. If you've never attended one of our sessions in the past, we are recording this. It will be stored on our website as well as our Canvas page so that you can access it at a later date and time. We are hoping that this ECHO community is an interactive community, so please take a minute to turn on your cameras, ask questions in the chat, and if you have a case that you are interested in learning more about, please consider sending in a case narrative. It's a great way to learn from your colleagues as well as to solidify your skills. Anytime we are using any information, please remember to protect individuals' privacy. Take any identifiable information like names or family members, where they work, and de-identify them. If you have any questions about that, please reach out to our hub members. Our hub members all have an asterisk in front of their name, so you can chat them or also email them. Please rename your profile. We've all been on Zoom, so we probably all know how to do that, but it is those 3 dots in the top left-hand corner where you can rename your profile with your name and where you work. Once again, how to raise your hand. And then that pre-registration, if you would like to ever pre-register to get the slides or information in advance, email earlyecho@usu.edu. After our session, we will be mailing out or emailing a survey that comes in your email. Please fill that out. That is how we take that information and how we are able to keep these sessions free. It is also how we mail out our certificates of attendance after those surveys have been completed. If you have any questions,
Janelle,
yep.
Just a shout out to those who turned it in. We had 40+% for March. So thank you to all of those who sent it in. If we get 50% this month, that would be even better. So just take care of those surveys. That would be awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. If you have any questions about how to access Canvas, please email us either at earlyecho@USU or kurt.phillips@USU. He is the one who sends those invites out. Canvas is also a great way to ask any further follow-up questions on our discussion board to the participants in our sessions. Case studies, again, are a great way to share information about a case that you, or a situation that you just want to hear recommendations about. They are a great way to really just solidify and build our skills within that. REDCap is our survey one. If Kurt will always say, check your spam or junk email folders if you have not gotten those. So it really is, the surveys are the way that we take the data and are able to share it for, to be able to keep these sessions free. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And we do share information about our presenters and any other useful information that we come across or people share with us. I'm really excited today to have Kristi Wees from Mountain State Genetics present with us and share her information with us. I am going to now just thank you all for attending and stop sharing and turn it over to Kristi.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us. Thank you, Janelle, for having us today. Just get my slides up there in presenter mode. Are we all good? Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, good deal. So I am from Mountain States Regional Genetics Network. I am actually the project's manager for Mountain States, but my journey to Mountain States started about 10 years ago when I found them on a Google search as a mom with a child who was not quite in early intervention yet, but who was really struggling medically. And we were getting some clues that maybe something genetic might be going on. And I was trained as a chemist, and so my thoughts were, surely they must have taken some blood in the hospital that could give us a clue to what might be going on with my baby. And I had no idea about newborn screening. I had no idea about really any genetic testing at that point. And so that is what led me to Mountain States in trying to put those pieces together and figure out what might be going on. And so 10 years later, my daughter is doing well and thriving and is at school now. And so I'm able to dedicate my time to helping other families. And that's really what we wanted to share with you today, is about our Genetic Navigator program. So I'll tell you a little bit about Mountain States first, but then I also want to highlight the Genetic Navigator program, which is a family-to-family program that we've initiated in the Mountain States to help families help other families who are on this genetics journey. And I believe Tristan is joining us on the phone. Tristan, are you there?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can. So Tristan is our Utah Genetic Navigator. And so once I get to that point in the presentation, Tristan, if it's okay, I'll introduce you, and then you can say a few words if that's all right.
Perfect.
Does that work? Okay, perfect. All right, so who is Mountain States? Just curious, a show of hands, wiggle your fingers if you know who Mountain States is, or if you've ever worked with Mountain States before. I see some fingers rising. Great. If you're new to Mountain States, if you haven't heard of Mountain States before, Mountain States Regional Genetics Network is an 8-state regional genetics network. This network is funded by HRSA, Health Resources Service Administration, and we are funded currently for a 4-year grant cycle, which started in June 1st, 2020 and goes until May 31st, 2024. So we're coming up right at the end of this May and the beginning of June at our very halfway point in our grant cycle. We are part of a larger national network though. So Mountain States is actually one of 7 regional genetics networks. So any state that you live in or work in or know somebody that might need similar services, there is a regional genetics network mapped to that state. The territories are also being covered. Some of the territories are now also being covered. We are all coordinated. All of the regional genetics networks are coordinated by a national coordinating center. You can see that blue dot right here. They coordinate all the regional genetics networks, as well as another, what I call the third leg of our 3-legged stool of our grants, National Genetics Education and Support Center and Family Support Center. And that is more commonly referred to as the Family Center. But all of these things on this map, the NCC, the 7 regional genetics networks, and the Family Center are all bid together, meaning we all have the same start dates, end dates for our grants, and we all work in collaboration with one another. This is our funding statement. As many of you know, this work can't be done without the funds that support it. And so our funds again come from HRSA and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Our mission really at Mountain States is, and for all the regional genetics networks and the National Genetics Education and Family Support Center and NCC, is to improve access to quality genetic services for medically underserved populations. We, in our region, in Mountain States, have a lot of underserved populations. So I think when we hear the word underserved, we think sometimes just socioeconomic, but we have a lot of geographic barriers, as you all know very well, in the Mountain States. And so just as an example, one of our states, the state of Wyoming, does not have a geneticist in the state on the ground, boots on the ground. And so genetic services looks very different in Wyoming than it might for Texas, where the Human Genome Project was partially sequenced in Houston, Texas. So that really gives us a lot of challenges in the Mountain States, because we cover a vast area with not very many individuals that work in the genetics field. Our program objectives for our entire grant are these 4 categories or these 4 buckets. To provide a regional infrastructure. We do that by having state teams. Actually, Janelle is part of our Utah state team, and we also have an advisory committee. We also, that second bucket there is to provide education to providers and families. We do this through a number of different ways. We have a primary care provider education program called Time for Genetics. If you know any primary care providers, pediatric clinics that might like to participate in that, we'll be recruiting our 3rd cohort for that this summer. And then we have our genetic ambassadors and genetic navigators, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. Our 3rd bucket is telegenetics. This is a program objective for all the regional genetics networks, but it's been very important for Mountain States because of the lack of genetics professionals in our region. Using telegenetics can obviously span miles. And while we were doing telegenetics well before the pandemic has really caused all of us to realize the power of telemedicine. And then sustainability is our last program objective, and that is just making sure that we are setting up programs that without funding could be sustained in our region. This is just our staff. You may recognize some of these folks, maybe not. Our project directors for our Mountain States Regional Genetics Network are Kathy Hassel and Janet Thomas. Janet Thomas is a metabolic geneticist, very heavily involved with metabolic newborn screening conditions and metabolic clinics in Colorado. And Kathy is an adult hematologist, but she works really a lot with quite a bit with the sickle cell disease community. At the bottom there, we have Liza Creel. She's our external evaluator. That's myself there as the projects manager, and Cody Price serves as our state team coordinator. And we are administered, our grant is administered out of Texas. Texas Health Institute holds the grant for Mountain States. And so this is their staff: Ankit, Sherry, Stephanie, and Katie. There's 5 big initiatives that we focus on each and every day. Many more initiatives, but these 5 I wanted to highlight today. As I mentioned, we have our state teams. Every single state in Mountain States has a state team, a multidisciplinary team that includes practitioners, it includes genetic professionals, it includes families that are impacted by genetic conditions, and those state teams meet monthly to talk about barriers to access to care in the Mountain States. We have our Time for Genetics initiative. I mentioned that. That's a primary care education initiative for pediatric clinics, family practice clinics. We also have some primary care algorithms. So these are actually 2 algorithms on the topics of developmental delay and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that were designed to be able to be taken to a primary care provider and help them walk through the first steps and stages of either beginning testing for these conditions or referral for these conditions. The Genetic Navigators is what we're here to highlight today, and this is a family-to-family navigation of the genetic service system in each of our states, and I'll be introducing you to Tristan in just a minute. And each year, annually, we have a genetic summit. This is our big educational event in our region. We had it last year virtually for the first time, and we've decided to hold it again this year virtually. So just to save the date there for November 9th and 10th, 2022 for our virtual summit. Now I'd like to introduce you to our navigators. On the screen here, you'll see all 8 of them, covering all 8 of our states. But I would really love to introduce you to the one for Utah, who is Tristan West. And Tristan, would you like to unmute and just say hello to everyone and maybe just give a little of the background of how you came to be a genetic navigator?
Yeah, are you guys able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. My name's Tristan West. I actually grew up in the Logan area. I went to Utah State, and my first child was born with a rare undiagnosed genetic condition at the time. His name is Jason. He's now 10 years old. We struggled to get a diagnosis due to accessibility to testing, the cost, and the fact that you can see geneticists like once every 1 to 2 years. And so we went directly to a lab to get our genetic testing, which led to us getting a variant of unknown significance. And through personal research, I was able to find another family with the same variant. And the lab itself, GeneDx, took interest in this and was able to start some research, which practitioners continued, some geneticists continued, and we now have a diagnosis. It's called MCTT syndrome, MN1 C-terminal truncation syndrome, just based on the location of where it is. It's a craniofacial syndrome. The kids are nonverbal, have hearing deficits, and severe developmental delay. And we now have a paper that's been published 2 years ago saying that there were 24 of us in the world. And I've connected with quite a few, so I'm guessing we're at least at 60 in the world at this point. So it's a really exciting time. We've just started from the ground up. We're trying to start a foundation and learn. The doctors are actually learning from us. We are the connection for how they are getting information about this syndrome. So it's really exciting. Yeah, that's basically it. I got involved. I got connected with several people that are involved with MSRGN, and then I was alerted about the Genetic Navigator program, which really excited me because I would have loved this help when I was first starting out. And even though I live in the Salt Lake area now, there's still trouble in accessing the testing and the resources that we need. And so I'm excited to work with families and help them and navigate this journey, hopefully be able to find resources a lot earlier than I was able to. Like Kristi said, just Googling things and trying to find things and make connections myself. So I'm excited to connect with families online, on the phone, and answer questions, provide them resources, get them in touch with different things like the algorithms and how to talk with their pediatricians about their concerns regarding development and genetics.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tristan, for sharing your story and your connection. We are really blessed to have these 8 individuals. They all have experience just like Tristan, similar to Tristan, but all different experiences as well, different conditions, but they all have the common thread for our program is that they've all navigated genetics in their own state. So they know some of the ins and outs of referrals and other services that might need to be connected. And I just want to tell you all as early childhood professionals that they can be a resource to you and your families in connecting them, or even just, I feel like one of the biggest things our navigators can provide is that conversation, letting a family know that they're not alone, even if that family doesn't share the same genetic diagnosis. Knowing somebody that's been on this road before is sometimes just very, very comforting for a family. So with that, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our program and what some of the roles of the navigators do. This is a very family focused role. So we have asked them to, of course, navigate with professionalism and ethics, but they are outreaching and engaging with families who do need to navigate genetics in their state. They're doing that through a number of different ways. Some of them are doing social media outreach. Some of them are doing presentations like this one to other service providers in their state, just to let them know that they exist. But then as families are referred to them or connected with them, they guide families as they navigate the genetics system in their state. And what does that mean? Navigate the genetic system in their state. Many people might think, well, that means a referral to a geneticist. But in our realm of the Mountain States, we don't always necessarily believe that equates to a referral to a geneticist. So what we look at it as at Mountain States is that we have so few geneticists to go around. We know there are long wait times in all of our state clinics. So we really start back a step in that conversation with the primary care provider. And so helping the families express their concerns or talk to their care providers, maybe even talk about how their primary care provider might be able to begin some testing, begin some genetic evaluation if they're comfortable. That's where we look at the process starting. And that can obviously start well before that with conversations at the early childhood intervention level as well. So We assist, our navigators assist in identifying and providing national, regional, state, and local genetic resources for our families. So part of our training curriculum was highlighting some tried and true vetted resources at the national, regional, and state level. One of my favorite ones is a organization called GUARD, Genetics and Rare Disease. I don't have a slide for it, but after we're done talking, I'll pop it in the chat for you all because I think it's invaluable. It comes out of national NHGRI, genome.gov, an NIH division that looks at genetics, but it's actually, they actually have a 1-800 number manned by genetics professionals, usually genetic counselors, that anyone can call and talk to. A family can, a professional can, about a specific condition. So if there's a specific disease condition that you are working with a family and you just don't know much about it, this organization can send you information via email, via mail, and they have great resources on their website. So that's just one of the many resources that our genetic navigators have been trained on. And last but not least, our navigators nurture advocacy and growth of family leaders. Many times as a family navigates the journey, like I did, like Tristan has, we are looking for ways to help other families or to advocate in the genetics world so that the path is a little easier for someone coming behind us. And so we have some of those opportunities and trainings within Mountain States. And so if a family is ready for that, if they want more, if they want to do some work nationally or regionally, our navigators have the connections to those opportunities. So next, I just want to switch gears just to another resource. This is a Mountain State specific resource. I'm going to highlight this because we have had so much feedback from early childhood providers that this has been really, really helpful for them. So I wanted to make sure that I provided it to you all today. This is, again, something our genetic navigators have been trained in utilizing with families. The idea for this handout came from hearing from families saying, I knew right off the bat something was wrong, but I had trouble communicating it to those in the healthcare field. And I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know the right name for it. I didn't know. And so we did a survey last spring, and we simply asked families to answer the survey if their child had gone on to get a genetic diagnosis. And we asked them what were their red flags. Well, as a caregiver, as a family member, as a mom, as a dad, as a grandma, as a grandpa, what did they notice first with the child that were their red flags or warning signs or symptoms that they would self-report? And taking all of that data, we had about 115 responses. Taking all that data, categorizing it, it fell into these 6 kind of buckets or 6 lines here. Developmental delay was the top category. You can see the other ones: physical features, feeding issues, behavior, failure to thrive, and strength and tone. And then there were some other kind of one-offs or random ones that are down in that other category. But the key piece to know for you all is that when we did the statistics on it, 89% of the red flags were reported before the age of 4 years of age. And so that's right in your early intervention age category. We were really cognizant when we made this resource to keep the terminology that the families use. So if you look, I'll just point your attention to one of them down in the strength and tone category down here. You can see the word floppy or low muscle tone. And in parentheses, we put hypotonia. This was key for us because, again, going back to that communication, we've heard time and time again from families about communication and using the right words. So we wanted to keep their words on here, but also put in parentheses the medical terminology or terminology that a therapist or a doctor might use to use it as a communication guide to be able to translate between a family and a provider. And so we've heard feedback from a lot of families that this has been helpful because they've literally taken this and circled the things that they're worried about, the red flags that they're seeing in their own child, and then taken this to their pediatrician and said, hey, can we have a conversation about genetics? And it's led to further referral or testing. And so I leave this with you all today. We do have a couple printed versions of it. We're just getting ready to do a second printing because we have now translated this into Spanish, so we're getting ready to do a two-sided one. The Spanish one's not quite ready for our website yet. It should be up there in a week or so. But this QR code will take you to a page where you can get the PDF of this English version, and then I'll be sure to let Janelle know once we publish the Spanish version as well. And it also, this QR code is the same here that's on the flyer. It takes the families to a landing page to give them more resources. So we link to Learn the Signs Act Early resources. We try to make a connection that if your child's having any of these red flags, there could be a concern for a genetic condition, and some other resources to talk with their providers. So just wanted to bring that up as something that might be helpful for you all in the work that you do. In this last slide, or second to last slide here, is just a reminder, save the date for 2022. I mentioned it already, but for our Genetics Summit, we have a lot of great speakers. Last year we had 12 great speakers, and those are all archived on our website. So I will also pop that in the chat because those are all recorded, and you can watch those if there's any topics that you'd like to go. We had one on autism that I did with a geneticist, and we had some other pediatric topics that you might be interested in. So with that, I'm just going to pause here. This is my contact information slide. I have links to our Facebook and Twitter as well. And then I have another slide with all the contact information for our genetic navigators, including Tristan's information. But I'm just going to pause here and just ask if there's any questions that I can answer. Yeah, I see a hand up from Pat.
Hi, I'm a frontline person, see kiddos, right out of the chute. And I think in my career, you'd get a genetics eval, it would look at chromosomes, do an MRI or CT, and then boom, kid's normal, away we go. Now there is so much that you can do. Can you sort of summarize where a kiddo goes, the family goes, once diagnostic testing, because a lot of insurances won't pay for it. That's the other thing I've discovered.
Okay, you're finding that a lot of families are getting rejected for specifically what type of testing?
Well, you know how you do I don't know the terminology. You do the fish and you do all this, like it's multiple levels. You're not just looking at chromosomes. I mean, you're doing all this stuff that is way over, and you're a chemist, so maybe you can explain what they're looking at.
Oh, I wish I was a genetics professional and could explain it in the true form of the word, but I do have a resource for you. We have a great webinar coming up on exactly this topic, because you're right, there's so much out there. There's now whole exome sequencing, whole genome sequencing, WES, WGS, you've got the chromosome microarray, you've got Fragile X testing, right? You've got all of those things, and it's dizzying. How do you make sense of it all? So as part of that initiative that I mentioned, the Time for Genetics, which is for primary care providers, we are having a genetic testing webinar on May 18th. And it is free and open to anyone who wants to come. But we have an amazing speaker. I will just give a shout out. We have an amazing speaker. He is a geneticist from Baylor College of Medicine, and he has a wonderful gift of making dizzying genetic testing very understandable. The title of the talk is Genetic Testing, It's Not Rocket Science. So his name is Daryl Scott, and he's going to be speaking with a genetic counselor, Haley, who is going to be kind of demystifying the ordering and the insurance and the approval side of it. So that hopefully is helpful as well on your other question, which was so many parents getting denied. So if I can stop sharing, I can put some of that stuff in the chat for you. So our registration is open for that webinar. So I will make sure and get that. So give me just a second. But I hope that would be helpful. There are a lot of different tests out there. And I had read something recently, I don't know if this is still true, but I had heard that there are 10 new genetic tests come on the market every single day. And so trying to keep up with that is probably seems quite daunting, but this his approach for this webinar is he is going to ask two questions. Do you know the diagnosis, or do you not know the diagnosis? So if you can look at the child and maybe you recognize a syndrome, or maybe you have an inkling that maybe certain things are going on, then he has a flow chart for that. And then if you have no clue what's going on with the child, he has a flow chart for that. So that's kind of the overview of the link I just put in there, the time for genetic testing webinar. Is that helpful for you, Pat, maybe? If you're able to attend, and we record those. So if you do miss it or you're with kiddos at the time it is, then we do send out a recording for those as well.
Well, I think the biggest issue I have as a frontline person is the family says, oh, well, everything's normal. And you're looking at the baby and clearly developmentally, the child is not going through their milestones. And so how to be of assistance without pushing, like really pushing.
Yeah, and that's all changing too. So on the developmental delay side of things, if they're not meeting their milestones, there are some changes at the national level with what the order of the testing should be, and going more to things like whole exome sequencing sooner than doing a whole lot of other things. So I do have another webinar in that same series where Dr. Austin Larson, he's a geneticist at Colorado Children's Hospital. He did a webinar just on developmental delays and what the guidance is at the national level on what a child with developmental delay should be tested for. And that also goes along with our developmental delay algorithm. And so I will pop that in the chat there too. So the developmental delay algorithm is really kind of a tiered instruction sheet for a primary care provider to begin workup. So let me go with that. So a lot of families might not be ready for this, right? Like right off the bat, you're exactly right. How do you that's where I think a genetic navigator could come in handy and helping a family just talk about some of their barriers, maybe sharing their story on how it changed, how testing might have changed. And I want to just be honest, genetic testing is not for everybody. And so it's not our position at Mountain States to push any genetic testing. It's really to help identify the barriers that a family is experiencing and making sure that they have the information they need to make the best decision.
Can you guys hear me?
Go ahead.
I wanted to say something. This is Kristen. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead, Kristen.
Well, hopefully to answer that question or to address that question, hopefully that's where I can help as a genetic navigator too, so that if you're having these conversations and you don't want to be pushy and you don't want to tell someone, hey, there's something wrong with your child. It's a really hard thing to accept. And we went through that because my son was rare. All the stuff was unremarkable. It was normal. And so we kept thinking over and over again, okay, he's normal. And then he's not. And then he's normal and he's not. Perhaps you can refer them and say, I have a parent who's been through a lot of the similar things and might be able to help you with resources and explain some things about genetic testing. It's unfortunate that the doctors don't always explain that it doesn't mean everything's fine, that there's just different levels of testing. And so it might come better from someone that's like their peer, like myself, that can explain, hey, this is where you're at right now and things might be okay, but it doesn't mean 100% things are okay, that there's other testing that can be done. This is kind of the procedure. This is what Utah tends to do as far as waiting and then looking and then waiting and looking. And the other thing I want to mention is that because genetic testing is changing so much, insurance starting to cover things. So just because they didn't cover it 6 months ago doesn't mean that they won't today. And a lot of times they're going to just deny it right away, and then you just need to do an appeal. We're finding that I tried to do this like 8 years ago. It was a hard no from a lot of insurances to cover whole exome sequencing, which is after you do kind of all of the little arrays and everything looks normal. Now we're seeing most insurances are covering that, but they may put up a fight because that test has now become very affordable, and now they're looking at whole genome. And so just because those parents are told no doesn't mean that it's 100% no. And again, that's something that I can talk with them about, that I'm happy to talk with them about.
That's
I see
awesome.
another question up here that I missed earlier, but it says, I heard that there can be a long wait list for genetic testing. Is this true? I would definitely say that varies across our region, but the wait time usually is dependent on the genetics appointment. So the appointment with the geneticist themselves, who then sometimes orders the testing. The thing that I don't think most people know is that you don't have to be a geneticist to order testing these days, because of the price has dropped, because the availability of these tests is literally a buccal swab, and kits can be mailed directly to families' houses now for whole exome and whole genome sequencing. Primary care providers can order genetic testing. The biggest thing we found with Mountain States is whether they're comfortable in doing that or not. And so that's where our education program comes in, hoping to help them, empower them with the information they need, because the most things we hear from our primary care provider community is, I don't know what to do with the results, right? Or I don't know how to do informed consent for the family for a genetic test. And so we're trying to address those barriers and provide them resources and help on the primary care provider side. But if you are working with a family that is experiencing a long wait time, there are things they can do in the meantime. Again, if developmental delays are involved, I would check out that developmental delay algorithm and see if they can initiate a conversation with their primary care provider. There are some patient initiated clinical tests available now. So there's that direct to consumer category that's 23andMe and Ancestry and those things that don't come along with a geneticist or a genetic counselor. Those are things that Mountain States wouldn't necessarily recommend because they're not clinical level tests. But then there's also another category that seems to be popping up that come with genetic counseling, and they are clinical level tests, but a patient can initiate that testing. So we don't recommend any labs. We don't because of our grant funding, but those things do exist out there that families might come to you and let you know that they found on the internet or on internet searches.
And then there's another comment in there from Adrian. I don't know if you can see that, Kristi, or you want me to?
Oh, yep, I see it now. The Cadillac one.
Yep.
Okay. So it says, I'll read it so Tristan can hear. For families that go and get the Cadillac of genetic testing and find nothing, but are severely delayed with seizures, visual concerns, etc., is this program a good fit for them? So it sounds like you're kind of describing a person that's been on a genetic odyssey and they still don't have answers. They're kind of they've done a lot of testing and they're kind of in that undiagnosed category. And I would say yes, because we've had Tristan being a perfect example of this, right? It was in that undiagnosed category for a long time. We have other families that are part of Mountain States that don't have a diagnosis. So there is still support there, even if they don't have a definitive genetic diagnosis.
And then it also looks like Pat's hand is up again, and then
Oh, sorry, I didn't know if it was up from the first time. Go ahead, Pat.
No, again. Okay, so I'm interested in your group. So I often get little kiddos, because I do work in the NICU and I do work in early intervention, who end up having a rare diagnosis, but nobody knows. Nobody knows what the trajectory is going to be. And often well-meaning nurse practitioners and neonatologists will hand them a paper from the internet and boom, this is your kid, which can be devastating for the family when it's not representative of that child. So how do you help families sort of go through that grief? I've got a child with an issue and prognosis.
So I just want to preface that by saying all of us at Mountain States, meaning myself and the genetic navigators, are not genetic professionals. So we cannot talk about prognosis because we're not able to diagnose or prognose anything. We're not in the medical lane, if you will. We're there for patient navigation and support. But that's definitely a category that we covered in our training as far as meeting families where they're at. Families can come to us from all different aspects, being devastated by a diagnosis to just dipping their big toe in the water and saying, I think something's wrong with my child and maybe it's genetic because my sister's child has the same thing or something like that. So families are coming to us from all different pathways. And I would say for the one you're talking about, we have an initiative going on in Mountain States about some education, not only for families, but for providers on delivering a diagnosis with hope. There's a lot of conversation going on around how genetic diagnoses are delivered to families in the medical setting. And we actually had a speaker speak about that at our genetic summit. She's a genetic counselor. Some of you might know her, since she's from Utah. Her name's Layla Andoni, and she spoke, she gave a wonderful talk at our genetic summit about to providers mostly on how to deliver that diagnosis with hope. And so there's that side of it, right? There's the how it was delivered, and then there's the how the family received it side. We found too that sometimes families do not hear anything after the diagnosis is made. And maybe you've heard families describe it. I just talked to a family yesterday who said it sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher. And I said, what do you mean by that? She said, wah, 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 wah. She said, I heard nothing. I heard the diagnosis, and then the whole hour they spent explaining it to me, I heard none of it. And so we're cognizant of that at Mountain States too, and we have some initiatives that we're working on to bridge that gap. So when families have gone home, we're working on some videos, some clinic level videos that clinics can share with families that they might be able to digest at a later time after that grief and that shock they've worked through those feelings. So we're trying to look at it from all perspectives. Does that help?
I love that perspective of a diagnosis through with hope. I think that's so helpful, and that multiple times of hearing it. Then there it looks like there are 2 questions from Crystal.
Okay, yep, I see them. How much does genetic testing typically cost for a family whose insurance doesn't cover it? And also, are there some avenues that are more affordable than others? So first, I would answer that it depends on the genetic test ordered. So as Tristan was mentioning, whole exome test is one price, and whole genome is a whole higher price. A single gene panel might be a lower price. So it depends on what test was ordered. Many genetic testing companies now have family assistance programs. So some of them have individuals that the family can work with their insurance and get an estimate before the testing is done of what the out-of-pocket cost is and if they would qualify for that family assistance program. There are some research studies out there. They're not clinical laboratories, but they're research going on where a family might be able to enroll in a research program, and the testing is covered by that research program. So there's a lot of different options. I know the genetic counselor that's going to be on that May 18th webinar is going to cover some of the financial aspects of genetic testing. So I would highly encourage you to tune in for that, because she's gonna talk through some different options. But I've heard as low as a couple $100 for some families. But then we have worked with some families that have gotten a surprise bill of a couple $1,000, but with appeals and with going back and getting documentation, have been able to get that amount down. Obviously our advice is to do the homework on the front end, so there's no surprises. And so those are other things that our genetic navigators can talk with the family about talking with. It looks like, Tristan, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I wanted to just phrase and say, like in Utah right now, we have a wonderful lab that's doing a lot of testing for free right now for families. That was not available for my son. My daughter has some red flags, so she's received some of that testing, and it's been incredible to just go to a specialist and have them say, oh, she could have something in this category because her muscle tone is tight. Let's run this genetic test, and it checks for 300 different things, and it didn't cost me a dime. And so we work with Invitae a lot to do those tests. And then when she started having seizures, it was the same thing. Okay, well, we got a seizure panel, so let's run that. So a lot of times now, if we can kind of categorize where they may be, these panel tests are very affordable for families, and Invitae is covering the cost. I think at most, for a lot of the panels, I've been told I could be charged up to $100. And so I think there was one of the tests that I had $100 copay, but that was all that we needed. So there's different costs for different things, but that's kind of the direction that we're going in, since Invitae is working so well with patients here in Utah.
And thank you for that. As Tristan was sharing, that was her personal story. As I said, we cannot endorse any labs. So there's lots of labs out there that have similar programs. So I would just encourage you to have the family talk with their primary care provider, because it does need to be doctor ordered for many of these labs. And so they will need to have a physician that's willing to put in that requisition and have the account set up. So thanks for sharing, Tristan. So I did have a question about what contact information would you give to introduce this program to a family that has already had genetic testing and have no answers. So I'm guessing you're asking, Adrian, about the Genetic Navigator program specifically. So that's what I put in the chat. Is that what you were asking about? I just wanted to clarify. Maybe not. Yes. Okay, perfect.
Is that, sorry, that's how they get in contact for that support too that you were talking about?
Yeah, so to connect with the Genetic Navigator, I put the link in the chat for our landing page for our Genetic Navigators, which has each state and who the navigator is and their email contact information. So that's what's in the chat there. All right, I know we're coming up on time, Janelle, so I just want to be cognizant of time, but if there's other links and resources that people want, I'm happy to stay on, and you can direct message me or ask Janelle, she knows where to find me.
Thank you so much for all that great information. I love the resources. I've sent a couple of families your way to help navigate that beginning process, and I know they have found that Genetic Navigator so helpful, and hearing it from a family's perspective of what the next steps are. So thank you so much for sharing with us. We will get those slides out to everybody, as well as share them on our Canvas page. I'm super excited to have, and now Cassie, like in my brain, I was like, you told me Casey, no, Cassie, then I'm never going to get it right. So I'm super excited to have her present her case with us today. I'm going to go ahead and pull up her slides and share my screen, and then I will let her get started on it. Okay, can you see my slides? No, because I have the wrong one up. So 1 second. I thought I pulled up the right one. Oh. Talk amongst yourself for 1 minute. Kurt, do you want to give a plug for our survey while I'm finding?
Plug for the survey, man. Thank you. Thank you to Kristi for a great presentation. Part of what our surveys have in there, they have a free text area where you can go in and you can text on different topics. I know this is one of the topics that I believe in last year's early echo was requested more on genetics. And so we're really grateful for Kristi to come and present. So we do try to pay attention to those suggestions you give. Obviously, we have 50 people on and everybody giving suggestions. We can't get to all of them right away, but we try to prioritize based on the responses we get. So again, please fill out the surveys and help us to be able to make this what you want it to be rather than just what we feel that is important.
Thanks for.
I was going to say thanks, Kurt. And if you have any other genetic topics come through, we're happy to come back and share on others. Sorry, Janelle, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you for filling in that blank space while I was trying to find these slides. So now that here they are, and go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Kristi. I took a whole page of notes and I'm excited to refer the information you've shared. And thanks, Janelle, for this opportunity. I appreciate the chance to come and share my case study. And I look forward to hearing each of you, your ideas and experience and contributions to this case. So by way of introduction, my name is Cassie Riding, and I'm a parent advisor at the Utah School for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. My background is in sign language, and I'm currently a graduate student at Utah State University in the Deaf Education, Listening, and Spoken Language program. So if we can go to the next slide. So just a little background on this case. The case study today is about a remarkable little 2-year-old who was born with 1p36 deletion syndrome, which is a very rare genetic disorder, which causes severe developmental delay. And I started working with this child at about, they were referred for hearing services, deaf and hard of hearing services, at about 18, 19 months of age. So with our initial assessment for language and communication, we found that the child was scoring around what we typically expect of a 5-month-old. And also at the time, the child was completely nonverbal. They did have one monotone pitch that would just increase in intensity depending on need to communicate, different needs they were trying to communicate. With 1P36 deletion syndrome, we've learned that, through the things I've been able to research, I've learned that often hearing loss is an aspect. And for this individual, it's a unilateral hearing loss. So he has it's about severe to profound hearing loss in his right ear and normal hearing in his left. And the another interesting dimension to be aware of is that although he cannot hear on the right, the developmental delay kind of switches once you hit the shoulders. The left side of the child's body is very delayed, where the right auditory input is also delayed. And then the right side of the body below the shoulders is actually pretty functioning, with our left ear having access to having auditory access. And so really there wasn't a lot of kind of exactly what Kristi identified on the red flags was exactly what we were seeing with this young boy. And particularly, we just kind of had that loss of connection, social emotional connection, and real severe developmental delay. Recently, within about the last 3 months, the child had heart surgery. And since post-surgery, we've seen a lot of improvement in smiling and giggling. We've seen intonation increase for communication, which gives us lots of hope. A little family and culture background on the child. The child is from a Caucasian middle-class family. Both parents work. Mother has tried to adjust her work schedule so she can be home more with the child. And this individual does live with his mother, father, and a big brother who is 4 years of age. Mother is the primary caretaker. And an additional dimension to kind of consider with this case is due to the medically fragile nature of the child from birth, the father was very detached. He was resistant to interact for fear that they might lose the child. And so after about 1.5 years, mother finally sat down with the father and told him that he has to be involved with the child. She could count the number of times he picked up the child on one hand. And so connecting emotionally, helping the father connect with the child has also been an important aspect on our radar. The child also receives other services like PT, OT, feeding therapy, and has just recently started with SLP services. We can go to the next slide, Janelle, that'd be appreciated. So our primary areas of concern that I was hoping to address and get your input today, we're really trying to find approaches for expressive and receptive communication. Again, the child has no spoken language, but does cry out when a need is present. Visual language has been something we've been introducing more recently. And the child, through observation, we've noted that the child will bring the back of his hand to his mouth when he wants to eat. And when he's being fed, if mother waits too long, he'll start to repeat it. Primarily, the child's fed through G2, but recently started on soft baby foods. And since that's been initiated, we've noticed a hand to the mouth to communicate the desire to eat. We've also noted that the child will cross hands and either tap his arms or scratch when he really is wanting to be picked up or held or attended to, and it will increase in intensity. So physical accommodations to also be aware of is, and one of our big areas of concern is that the child within the next 5 or 6 months, we will be discussing transition and preparing for transition possibilities. So in our current toddler group setting, we recognize that the child who does have a wheelchair does better as far as connecting and tracking and staying attentive to whether it's the stories or music therapy. The child engages better when he's sitting in his wheelchair. However, the wheelchair also is only tolerated for short periods of time, so you often start to get wiggling and discomfort in patients with the chair. The next slide, thank you. So our primary goals that we've been working in the home with have been that of consistent visual communication. One of the medical providers informed the mother that with 1p36 deletion syndrome, which is so rare that of all of her medical providers, the mothers express that out of all the medical providers they see, only one has ever interacted with another child with the same genetic syndrome. And thus, one advice she had shared was that there is possibility that the hearing loss will continue to be progressive as the child ages, and that there's a possibility of vision loss. So we referred the child for some deaf-blind consult, and the vision at this time was not enough concern to start services, but we were able to cue mom onto things to watch for and be aware of, so that if there's changes in vision, we could add that. But in the back of mother's mind is this concern that the child won't be able to hear or see. And so with that understanding, we're considering ways, some of the barriers are really trying to figure out how to introduce touch cues, and wondering about the use of an AAC device. Due to the barrier that we are uncertain about how much spoken language the child is actually processing, touch cues seem like a valuable option to add language and meaning. However, we do need to consider another barrier, that is the sensory issues the child experiences. We've slowly been able to work, PT and OT have been working with the child, whereas before they would just, any touch would startle them and they would resist. They now can have touch on their feet and legs, and we're working on arms and hands. But with that realization, we'd love some input on ways you've dealt with sensitivity to hand over hand, especially with the delayed left side of the body. In our consideration of introducing an AAC device, there's also the barrier that the child is not yet pointing to anything, but they do reach for objects, and we're considering how to make more choices and objects available visually. So thank you. So again, we mentioned the medical provider's concern and the referral to deaf-blind services that have been made, which has also provided motivation for tactile cues with the gestures to prepare for possible future needs. So as we break up, I would really appreciate your input, your advice, your own experience, or even suggestions on different language and communication strategies we could start to introduce now in the home to prepare the mother and the family for transition, resources that would be appropriate and applicable for this child with his unique and individual circumstances, as well as resources that could strengthen and help the family, not only with language and communication, but also with that social emotional connection.
Great. Thank you so much, Cassie, for
Thank you.
sharing your case with us. I'm going to open it up for just a few minutes to see if anybody has any follow-up questions before we move into breakout groups to answer these few questions posed on this case. Okay, no questions. So we are going to go ahead and move. Hub members, if you'll remember to either ask somebody to take notes yourself. We will break out for 20 minutes. If we have time, I will have each of your spokespeople or your note taker give it one recommendation, and then we will share those with on our Canvas page, as well as send them to Cassie.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna move you all into breakout groups. So you should get something that is asking you to join. Hi, welcome back, everybody. I think everybody has come back from the breakout groups. Is that correct, Bailey?
I think so.
Okay, I am just going to, we have enough time to go over one strategy from each of the breakout groups. So I'm going to call on the hub member. If you did not, if you were not the note taker or presenter, just call on your person. So Heather, your group is on my screen first.
All right, so Jesse's going to report back what we discussed.
Okay,
Yes.
just one idea.
Okay, so the first one was using baby sign videos called babysigningtime.com that are short 10 to 20-minute videos that the whole family can watch and learn the sign as well.
Oh, that's a great idea. Okay, Kate, your group.
I was with Shelby, so I don't know. Did you?
It's
Were
up
you?
to you.
Did
I guess we didn't pick out someone to present. I just took I took notes, so I'll kind of just write what we talked about. I think one of the biggest things we talked about was knowing that he gets uncomfortable in his wheelchair pretty quickly. Maybe giving or getting access to different kinds of supported upright sitting positioning tools or standing frames, or maybe something in that aspect, so that when he does get uncomfortable in his wheelchair, we can transition him to a different position, but still being upright and supported.
Great idea.
Gist of it.
Okay, Barb, your group.
And Kurt took notes in our group, so we'll let him talk.
So I would just say that probably the overall theme that we came up with was trying to find ways to connect other kids, because 1P36, like there's 24 people in the whole world or something like that, have this. So finding other people who have kiddos with hearing and vision losses and trying to get that group connected, because you're going to be on an island if you're just looking for other kids with 1P36. But if you can pick out some, and I think somebody mentioned that there's Usher's disease and others involved in both the hearing and the vision, and finding how did they navigate transition? How did they work on language and communications? How did they, what resources could they find? Because even though it's a different syndrome or a different diagnosis, a lot of the functional limitations or functional challenges will be the same. So trying to find a way we can connect everybody together. And maybe that's through USDB, maybe it's through another organization, but let's find a way to connect.
Perfect. Pat, I know your group was next.
Okay. Well, Whitney, who is from USDB, basically said that they have an augmentative communication team and that they will come in and assess this little boy. And I think that is a fabulous suggestion. But also she said, don't use hand over hand, use hand under hand.
Two great suggestions with that. So if your groups will remember to send both either early echo at usu.com and it to Kate. Kate, do you want to throw in your, I know it's DDI, but I never get it right anymore. To us, we will send those recommendations to you here shortly. They will also be up on the Canvas site for any of our participants to access as well. Our next session will be on May 4th at noon. We are having Lauren Ayalia from the U. She is going to be talking to us about early identification of cerebral palsy. So please join us. If you have a case, let Kate know, and she would love to have you guys present. So thank you very much for your time, and have a nice day.
Thank you, Janelle. Thank you all for your suggestions. Very, very helpful.